Continuing my quest to fill my national parks passport, we head to Springfield, Illinois to Abraham Lincoln's home before he became President of the United States of America and assassinated.
The house was built in 1839. The Lincolns bought it in 1844. So it was 5 years old. They bought it from Reverend Dresser, who just happened to be the minister that married them. Springfield was pretty small at the time. I think when Lincoln actually moved here in 1837, that Springfield was like, I think 3,000. It was 3,000-ish. Then when he left for the White House in 1861, Springfield was closer to, I think it was 10,000-ish. Okay.
Was the capital at that time?
Yes, well, they actually moved in 1839 from Vandalia up to Springfield. And of course, people were like, well, why didn't you move to Chicago? You know, Chicago was pretty close to the same size as Springfield at the time. So that wouldn't have necessarily been a choice. And if that was in the middle, Springfield obviously is in the middle of the state, that would, you know, that's better than being further south. So it just seemed to think. Lincoln was actually one of the legislators who signed the bill moving the capital from Vandalia up here to Springfield. He was a group of the Long Nine, which they were legislators who were 6 feet and tall. Yeah, but anyway, so he was invested. He lived in Salem at the time, but then moved here to Springfield in 1837. I don't remember when the bill was signed, but it became effective in 1839. So that they Abraham and Mary got married in 1842, and they moved into the Globe Tavern. Marry me, we'll live in the Globe Tavern. But it was a boarding house. And it actually was a good thing for Mary because she didn't know how to cook, or she had servants. She didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So we moved into the boarding house, and some of that is taken care of. Yeah. So, but then they had Robert in 1843, and people complained about the noise of the baby. So then they bought the house in 1844. They moved from the Globe Tavern and lived somewhere else, but then they were able to purchase the house in 1844. So, and then because of traveling issues at the time, you know, because they came and then they didn't leave like they did now. And so they had a social number of social events. So then, and eligible bachelors.
Oh,
So Mary moved here and she became involved in the social events then, and that's how she met Abraham. She also met Stephen Douglas. One of her goals in life was to be married to the President of the United States, and she thought that Abraham had the chance of that from Stephen Douglas. Yeah. That's perfect. Okay, so when the Lincolns moved in, the house was only a story and a half. The half story was a sleeping loft or attic. And the tallest point in the pitch of the roof was 6'6". So do we know how tall Mr. Lincoln was?
6'4".
6'4". He was 6'4", so we're pretty sure he hit his head on the pitch of that roof. So they lived here for a couple years. And then they added this room that you see as the parlor, pushed the kitchen over, and then this was their bedroom for 10 years. So when it was their bedroom, we believe that's where little Eddie passed away. And he was close to 4, and he died of consumption, which today we call tuberculosis. And then they would have had his funeral here in the front part. So then fast forward to 1855, 1856, they finished off that half story, made it a full story, and all the bedrooms went upstairs. So then this magically was transformed into the back parlor. So they added these lovely original doors, which allowed them to subdivide the 2 rooms for heating or whatever purpose they had. So then, somewhere in the front and back parlor, somewhere in this space, we don't know, we don't have an X marks the spot, Lincoln was offered the nomination for the presidency. Delegation came down from the great city of Chicago from the Second National Republican Convention in May of 1860, offered him the nomination, and he said, I'll have to make it up. Because the nation was on the brink of a civil war. Not a good time to run for president, personally. Would never be a good time to run for president, but that was probably a particularly bad time. So Lincoln wanted to think about it some more. He talked it over with Mary, but as I already told you, she wanted to be married to the president. So I'm sure that they still discussed it, but that was one of her goals. So he thought about 3 or 4 days, wrote a letter and accepted the nomination. So if you look at these drawings in front of you on the poster boards, one for the front parlor, a different one, obviously, for the back parlor. These were done by an artist. He came from Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper, which was a pretty famous newspaper at the time. I've been at other park sites, and they've also had things alluding to this newspaper. But they were public. The drawings were done in June of 1860, before Lincoln was even running for president. But can someone with good eyes look and see where the date is in the left-hand corner of the one in the front parlor?
March 9th, 1861.
Right. So March 9th, 1861, just as Lincoln was getting ready to move into the White House with the inauguration, they published these to let people know how Lincoln was living here in Springfield, Illinois. Because do we know what kind of house he was born in?
Mhm.
Yeah, log cabin. Did he use that as part of his campaign platform?
The Illinois Rail Splitter, yes.
Yeah, he did. He did. The Illinois Rail Splitter, born in a log cabin. I would too. If I had humble beginnings and I was trying to be elected, I would use that. And he did. So he wanted to let people know that that was where he was born. He's not living in one in Springfield, Illinois. He was the first president born that was elected not of the original 13 colonies. So from the Midwest, and sometimes the people from the Midwest kind of get the bad rap of being like a hick or, rural or whatever, all that stuff. So they wanted to let people know, hey, that's where he was born. He's not living like that right now in Springfield, Illinois. This was considered middle class, upper middle class, 3,100 square foot house, a far cry from the log cabin he was born in. So, any questions about the front and back parlor?
Are the original things the hangings?
Okay, so do you see those two pictures in that drawing there?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell what those are pictures of? No, I can't either. I've looked at it hundreds of times. And you can't. And I don't have real good eyesight either, but no, you can't tell. So what they did was they made an educated guess on some of these things. George Washington, Martha Washington were admired by the nation. So that's what people had on the walls, just like we have pictures of our relatives, kind of a lot of people do. So they made an educated guess about that. Obviously, that's how they were attached to the wall. We don't know for sure who the pictures were of. Okay. As far as original to the Lincolns, the marble top table was theirs. The whatnot shelf with all these knickknacks on it, that belonged to them. The candles that are on the back mantle of this back parlor, those belong to the Lincolns. The bookcase was theirs that you see as you go into the dining room. This rocking chair, this lovely rocking chair, it is a reproduction. The rest of the black covered furniture belonged to the Lincolns. Everything else is from the period. So we're very fortunate we have as many pieces that belong to the Lincolns, and each piece that they have a provenance on. So they know who owned it when, where it was, why we own it, if it left, it belonged by somebody else, how we got it back. They have authentication on all the pieces. We have a curator who takes care of all of that. She's very talented and she's been here a long time, and there is a lot of information. We were just talking the other day about how if and when she retires, so I'm sure there'll come a day, the amount of information that she knows will be leaving with her, because she just, you can ask her a question and she just knows. She's very intelligent. So
What's the significance of the black upholstery? Because in the Edwards house, it's the same thing. He says the original of that house had black.
I'm not sure. Except originally it was horsehair, so, horses were black, or horsehair could have been black, so there might be some connection there, I'm not sure. That's a good question, but I don't know. Yeah, because it's like, okay, with everything being so dark in here, why would you then have black furniture? Good question, yeah.
The fireplace converted to a wood stove.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. They converted it because that was a much more efficient way to heat. This is not the original stove. The original stove is actually up in Michigan in Henry Ford's museum. I think it's in Dearborn.
Deerfield Village.
Deerfield, that's it, Deerfield Village. But it looks just like this. Somebody came in one day and they said, oh, you know, Lori, they said that pipe is wrong on there. And I'm like, okay, don't know anything about pipes. But they were right then. Well, I mean, they can tell by the way it was hooked up that it had never been used. It's never been used. So actually, in some respects, this is a better stove, but if you talk about authenticity, the one in Michigan is
How many
actually.
owners can you have to go left to go national?
How many owners?
Yeah.
Nobody.
It's a state, eh?
Okay, they rented it out from 1861 when the Lincolns left until 1887 when Robert sold it to the state of Illinois for $1, with the stipulation that no one had to pay to go through the house and that they would keep the house up. And then in 1972, the Park Service took over. So just one owner, I mean, the original owner, Reverend Dresser, and then the Lincolns, and then in 1887, Robert was the only one still alive. Because he's the only one who lived to be an adult. His last descendant died in 1985. So it was a male, but he didn't have any, I don't think he was even married, so he didn't have any children. So, but they rented it from 1861 to 1887. Somebody on one of the last tours asked me how many people rented it. I don't remember. They have a list though. I mean, it isn't like it's not known. They do know, and they know who the people were, and you know. the whole
This
thing.
wallpaper reproduced the original.
What they did was they used the information they have, which was this. They know what was available in Springfield, which that doesn't.
Mhm.
And they came up with this.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. We think if he sat in any of these chairs, that he would have taken these actually happen to be reproductions, so that the chairs. He would have turned that rocking chair upside down and used the back of it to support his back when he sat on the floor. We think he spent some amount of time wrestling with the boys in here. But he also played chess. And we have a chess set set up there. And then there's a stereoscope. The boys, Willie and Ted, could look at pictures in 3D with that. And then if you look at the drapes, that puddling or pooling of the fabric was a sign of wealth. It also helped keep out the drafts once you pull the drapes shut. It has been suggested that that might have been a good place for the cats to sleep. Lincoln rented feral cats. Mary said it was his hobby.
Oh,
So, and I've been told that I'm more of a dog person than a cat person, and I've been told that cats choose you, you don't choose them. And when Lincoln was here in town, not out riding the 8th Judicial Circuit, he would have been walking to his office on the square and walking home. And I'm thinking that the choosing probably happened on the way home. So then,
this is driving food.
You can do.
What's there? Oh, okay. Okay.
just make sure your feet are on the blue part. Okay, so original to Lincoln, I know. It's very tempting. Sometimes it doesn't go off when you do that, just so you know. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it just seems like, you know, you're just barely over it. And then other times it's like, okay, so why didn't it go over? Not an exact science. In the corner is a desk that belonged to Lincoln. And the chest of drawers belonged to Lincoln. Straight ahead. Yeah. And the wardrobe belonged to Lincoln. That's you. Yeah, they all three pieces are. And then the boots are size 14, but they're a reproduction of the parents Lincoln had, and they're not right and left. They're just boot A and boot B, and then you switch them to make the wear on the heel and sole more even. Oh, yeah, how would you like that? Oh, yeah, put you on a different way. Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, obviously,
I like the way we have it.
what is that new dollar? The Chevrolet.
That's yeah. Not sure. Okay, the hat is not an original hat. It's from the period. But it is showed the papers. Lincoln used his hat as a base.
Yeah.
So the kids in the neighborhood, there's a story to tell, that they put up a string on his hat. The papers through it, which would probably irritate most people. Lincoln, actually, if the story's true, he took it in his stride because he knew Willie and Tad were probably involved in the mischief, as well as the kids in the neighborhood, who he also had a great affection for and was known to take them for treats like ice cream and to the circus. Good boy. Yeah. So he was a man with a big heart. This is not his original bed. The original bed, the Lincolns had a tag sale before they were moving to Washington, D.C. because they didn't want to take everything with them, so they had a pile of stuff they were taking, a pile that they were asking friends to keep for them, and then they sold the rest of the tag sale. One of the things they sold was the bed. And so the family that was renting the house in 1861, the Tilton family, they were associated with the railroad, and they lived here from 1861 to 1869. So a good long time. Then they moved to the great city of Chicago, took the bed with them, and were living there in October of 1871. Yeah, so the bed was destroyed in the fire along, and I think they had bought 2 other beds, and I think that's the other thing that could have been destroyed also. Could they have? So, but this is a bed like Lincoln would have had, and it looks like it's not long enough, but the ceilings are 11 feet tall. It actually measures 6'11". Wow. And then they did this whole thing where people didn't lay down flat like we do. They were like, yeah, so, yeah. We have a piece of the original wallpaper. You know, we're talking about wallpaper doesn't last, no, but the wallpaper, when this was originally put on, it would have been 1855 when they finished off the 7th story. Now, the piece they found, I don't know what state, what was over it, or, you know, but somehow obviously it would have been preserved in some way to survive. I don't know whether the Park Service had it or whether the state of Illinois had it. Anyway, they took it, it is preserved under glass. The last time they brought it out, I think, was in 2018. Because I just started giving tours. They did a whole display in the visitor center about the wallpaper. And I asked somebody, and they said, no, they don't think they'll be bringing it out again because it's too frail. You know, they're afraid exposure and everything. So, but it's pretty cool because half of it they cleaned off the dirt, the other half they left, and you could still see that even on the part that had all the dirt on it. So, but the original came from France, and this reproduction came from California. Mary spoke fluent French. Some connection there. So Mary had her own room. That was a sign of wealth that the woman had her own room. But she kind of got the short end of this stick because she had Willie and Tad sleeping in her room on a toilet. So, but the chest of drawers straight ahead is the oldest piece in the house that came from her childhood home in Lexington, Kentucky. And then she had a mahogany commode, so she was not using the outhouse. Everyone else used the outhouse during the day, except in the day, like Monday was. That would have been a chamber building. So we had storms here. So, but everybody else would have been using the outhouse during the day, chamber pot at night. The fact they had separate rooms gave them both privacy for bathing. So Mary could close the doors. And then she would do a little sponge bath thing once a week, whether she needed it or not. Then, once Robert, the oldest, went away to prep school and then Harvard, once he left, he vacated the room across the hall. Willie and Tad moved over there. There is no heat in that room. It is right above the kitchen, but like even last night, it was cold here in Springfield. So they would have been coming back into their mom's room because there's no heat in that room. So out the window of their room is a balcony, a wrought iron balcony, not safe for children. So they were told, do not go on the balcony. So. And they yelled at random people walking by, vote for Lincoln. That's the, the stories. So, I mean, how cute could that be? And that they were part of the campaign. Yeah. The last room at the end of the hall was where the maid lived. Girls, 14, 15 years old, married, trained, how to be a domestic. Which really, she was from a wealthy family. She was used to just, having people wait on her. The fact that she was training these girls, but there's something to be said when you train somebody the way you want something done. So they worked 6 days a week, sunrise to sunset. They earned $1.50 a week, which is about $50 in today's money. So I love to ask the kids whether they think that's a lot of money or not. And some say, yeah, that sounds great. $50 a week, you could not live on that. So, but it's like an apprenticeship. Yeah. And if you didn't have any, so I've talked to my husband about this, and he goes, well, yeah, when you tell a small, young child, $50, they think, oh, that $50, that sounds like a lot of money. Yeah. And I get it every week. Yeah. So,
They had room for it though, too.
exactly. Yeah. So anyway, some went on to better paying jobs, others got married and ran their own house. Then a bunch of marbles. So some of the marbles they found when they did pretty, the outhouse and you take little stuff in. So, because they could have been anybody's. So they've also done do some of the other houses and added those marbles to their collection. So we got a variety of historic marbles.
Neighborhood marble.
Yes, neighborhood marbles. That's a good way to say it. Okay, so then this room is the maid's room, and that is the only original floor left in the house. Cool. And they did paint chips, and they know it was this lovely red color. Well, I think it's lovely. I do too. Now, it extends out over a porch, so this room would be also quite cold, even colder than the one over the kitchen. So we're ready to go downstairs. So please use the handrail. It's a little steeper than the one we came up on.
Really?
Yeah. So take your time.
So as big as the house was, it didn't have that many rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I had one maid.
Yes. Yes, one maid at a time. Yep. And they have the names of some of them. They've done research. They found out about some of them, others, and they don't have any idea how many they had altogether. Because they didn't, there's the census, they have the census, but the Lincolns only lived here for 17 years, so that would have only gone through a few census, so. So the Lincolns bought it in June of 1860, once he was running for president. Mary needed a better stove because they were going to be entertaining people and, campaigning, feeding them. So the wood goes in between where the biscuits and the irons are. Those two little doors open up. You shove the wood in there. And then on either side of the stove, there's a large door that swings towards you. And that's where you put the food in. It's got that leafish like design there. If you look over against the wall in that cabinet, there's a metal pail. They call that a dry sink, which I still think is an oxymoron kind of thing. It's like, okay, sinks are supposed to be wet, but because there's no running water, they call it a dry sink. So any water they hauled in though, they had to haul back out. I try to trick the kids sometimes. I say, well, couldn't they just dump it down the drain? They go, well, there's no drain. I'm like, you're right. There was no drain.
So that would have been the only storage in here then, was that cabin?
They also had a pantry.
Oh,
They did have the pantry, and you figure we're in part of the area that they could have. The dining room is right next to it. You know, you have to think, okay, it seems kind of small in some respects, but you don't have areas where you partitioned it off because a bowl of eggs there. Mary's signature dish when she went to potlucks was her almond cake. She had almonds on the top and almonds in the cake, and it involved beating egg whites. Okay, so being egg white challenged myself, I was very interested in this. So I guess she could have taken a fork. That would have taken a long time. Well, the curator thinks that she used a whisk. I thought, well, maybe she used one of those double things with the crank on it, double whisk with the crank on it. But it was patented. They would have already been living here in the house, and she probably would have already been making the cake. Who knows whether she even, but so the timing wouldn't be right for that. Because I know my mom had one of those, and I'm like, yeah, those work pretty good. But no, she would have been using the whisk. So I'm not sure how long she would have been beating it. But I kind of make a joke of it. We think that she was making. She did do something right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's her original cake plate. That's the flour.
Okay, so that's where I'm pointing.
Yeah, right under that knob, you pull it, and then that's the flour. And then they collected the rainwater. They had a big cistern underneath the ground, and the pipes fed the water into the cistern. And then they could pump it out. And then that's a regular well. And then they had a pantry. That's where the pantry was.
Where to put their brown water? This is stuff. Oh, no.
I'm not sure.
Right, so-
Yeah. Okay, as far as emptying the chamber, I think that's my segue into the chamber pots.
Yeah.
I saw something a long time ago about, and I think it was a Monty Python sketch. And they were in a castle, and somebody was throwing the chamber pot stuff out the windows. So of course it brought to mind, what did they do with the on? Well, Springfield was not known for being disease-ridden, which is what happens when everybody throws their chamber pot stuff out into the streets. So they made for Mary, they would have been emptying it into the tree. And they know that there's two other spots they know of where the outhouse was. This is the spot their outhouse was on when they left for Washington, D.C., which is why it's not the original one. There's one in Oakland, Illinois, and it is a 3-seater. They also got a barn. This is not the original barn. They had a barn. In the barn, they had the cats chasing the mice. They had a pig that was not a pet. They had a horse, a cow, and then the chickens and the chicken. And then on the other side of the barn, they had a couple of carriages, everyday carriages.
I'm sorry, what did they have?
Everyday carriage and Sunday carriage. Yeah. So thank you for your attention. There are 3 other houses open that you can go through on your own. One of them is across the street, the Arnold House. It has information about food and this here. with an uncontested provenance, is actually at Hill D, which is Robert Lincoln's estate in Vermont. So, and I have not been there, but one of my brothers, he went there, and I said, "Hey, did you see the hat?" And I was actually talking to my nephew, who's an adult, and he said, "What hat?" So my brother pipes up and said, "Yes, we saw the hat. They have it. It's in a glass case."
Construction ahead.
Well, guys, it doesn't look like they're going to let me into the Capitol. There's construction going on. I was wanting to go talk to the governor. What do I got to do to get to talk to the governor? One side note, when they donated that house to the Park Service, Lincoln's house, the thing was, the stipulation was you could never charge to go through the house, which they don't. It's free. They do charge you $2 an hour to park in the parking lot, so it ends up costing $4 to park in the parking lot.